This is Dr. Kathy Blatt with MH Educational Solutions, and you are here with my good friend Dr. Peter Horn at The Point of Learning. Peter and I attended graduate school together, and after about 10 minutes figured out we had a love of all things Buffalo, New York, including buffalo wings and even the same high school, although Peter's a lot older than I am. I'm here today to introduce my good friend Dr. Errick Greene. Dr. Errick Greene and I worked together in Washington, D.C. public schools, where his love for literacy allowed him to give me very direct and supportive feedback all of the time. I was privileged to work for him and with him. I'm excited to hear about what he's doing with his team in Jackson. Please enjoy the show.
On today's show, Dr. Errick Greene, an inspiring school leader.
My job is to ensure that we create conditions for great, magical, excellent things to happen and to be done.
As the superintendent of schools in Jackson, Mississippi, he has had to contend with relentless complications of the COVID-19 crisis.
We have to be extra cautious about the safety of the young people, yes, but also the possibility of them carrying the virus back home to elderly family members and loved ones and community members.
We talk some about the solutions that Jackson is discovering.
We're working with the city to create a wireless meshing around the city and in some of the densely populated areas where we're concerned about the folks having less connectivity, less opportunities and access for education, for employment searches and that sort of thing, for telehealth. Lots of opportunities that opens up for those families.
We also explore some of the moral imperatives of educating young people in this moment of greater awareness of social injustice.
This is the work. The work is not simply teaching young Errick to read, teaching young Kamisha to write, or to think critically about some benign topic, but thinking critically about the world around us in the broader context, and the ways in which we can all act to make it better.
And some of the practices that are helpful for any kind of leader or team player.
I'm modeling those times when it doesn't feel great. I'm modeling those times when I'm so determined that what I'm thinking is the right way, but my team is not on the same page with me. I've got to investigate that. I've got to explore that. Like, how is it that I'm just completely right and everybody else is wrong? How is that possible? Right?
All that and much more on this episode of Point of Learning. Do stick around. Errick L. Greene's career in education spans more than 25 years and about half of the continental United States. He started in the classroom, teaching middle school and elementary students. Later, he became a principal supervisor, chief of staff, and consultant to senior district leaders in Washington, D.C., Detroit, Syracuse, Baltimore, and Newark, New Jersey. Dr. Greene served as chief of schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma before arriving in Mississippi, where, as superintendent of Jackson Public Schools, he's responsible for the second largest district in the state. Errick earned his doctorate in educational and organizational leadership from the University of Pennsylvania, which is where I met him back in 2011. He holds 2 master's degrees in education, one from Trinity University and another from Howard University. Howard was also where he earned his bachelor's degree in political science. I could go on, but A, Errick urged me to hit it and quit it, and B, I want to reserve as much space as possible for this important and timely conversation. It gives an inside look at some of the challenges facing school leaders in this especially complex moment, charged with challenges related to public health and social justice, and also provides great ideas that anyone leading anything can apply, whether it's a team, business, or household. So just one last note before we get started. You will notice that Errick always refers to the 24,000 plus kids in the 54 schools and programs of his district, not as students, but as scholars. It's a small clue as to how seriously he takes the promise and potential of each and every one of them. Errick, thanks so much for taking time to do the show today. When I met you 9 years ago, you were supervising administrators and schools for a large sector of the Washington, D.C. public school system. After that, you served for a number of years as chief of schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In 2018, you accepted the call to become superintendent of schools in Jackson, Mississippi, where you are now. Now, historically, Mississippi has invested less than most other states in public education, which is one challenge. The Jackson District, with 22,500 young scholars in 52 schools, narrowly avoided a state takeover in 2017. So the district is being especially closely monitored all the time. And of course, your city is a state capital, so state education folks are not far away. Anyhow, the scrutiny, or as public school folk like to call it, accountability, is another challenge. As somebody familiar with you and your talents, I can't think of anyone better to serve in the role of JPS superintendent. But I've never asked you directly, what drew you to Jackson and this work?
Well, first off, just thank you for having me on. Pete, really excited to have this conversation. There were several things. I was obviously kind of building in my career, building towards the superintendency and looking forward to leading a school district and a district made up largely of children who look like me and with many of them with low-income households and neighborhoods, communities, a district where there's been lots of challenges and lots of, lots of room for continued growth and development. As I was looking around at opportunities to lead a district, there's something about the size of the district, the makeup and the composition of the student body, the team, some of the characteristics of the city, of the kind of surrounding community. There are lots of things about Jackson that just spoke to me. One, it's large enough to matter, but small enough to get your arms around. As I said, the student body and the families that we serve, lots of mainly folks of color, and there's a good number of folks living in low-income families, and so that's the work that I've done so much in my career, and where I just feel comfortable that this really tough work that I'm making a difference and doing something that's meaningful. As well, though, I met the leadership here, the school board members, the mayor here in Jackson. I had known the state superintendent for some time from our work in DC around the same time. So there are lots of folks in and around Jackson Public Schools where I felt like we were of like mind. I could see their vision and what they were looking for in terms of excellence in leadership and service, a commitment to lock arms and not to immediately be adversarial and to fight and challenge the work of the superintendent here. Just felt like, it was clear to me as I was looking at Jackson and considering this as my new home and where I'd do work for probably the rest of my career, that this is a place where I could really, really call home and where I could really dig in, stick and stay, set up roots and just become a part of what works here in Jackson. They also just had a number of partners. The Kellogg Foundation, as I said, the city and the state. Even though the state had moved to take over the district, they didn't want to. They didn't want to take it over. They were determined that something needed to happen, that change needed to happen, and they weren't getting that kind of urgent response from the school district early on, and so that's why they made the bold move that they did. But it was really clear that there would be partners in the work here, and so it just made sense to me. And I'm excited, and frankly, in the almost 2 years that I've been here, I don't regret it, not for a bit. And it's been tough. I will tell you, it's been tough.
We're going to get into some parts of that, but I understand that under your tenure, the district moved a full letter grade, in terms of quality, and you give some credit to some of the things that were already in process. But of course, that's part of the graciousness I know to be characteristic of you. I'm sure you had some role in that as well. But as if you didn't have enough on your plate already, speaking of challenges, COVID-19 dealt your district, like every other district and school of any kind throughout the country and across the globe. The coronavirus pandemic dealt JPS a staggering blow this spring. Now, you reopened last week, I believe, completely online. Is that right?
Right. Well, we were scheduled to reopen schools this week.
This week, okay.
And due to the governor's latest executive order that delayed the start of school in 8 counties around the state because of some of the numbers, the rising cases and infection rates. So we delayed until the 17th. But yeah, it's been tough in general, and then of course since March of this year, it's just been ridiculously difficult just to lead and to keep our arms around what is the truth with regard to the health crisis and what are the numbers saying. Because the same numbers, you have a few people talking about them and they're drawing vastly different conclusions and next steps and all of that. And that's been, I would say, part of the challenge, I would bet all of us as district leaders and likely others in other fields. But across the country, just struggling with you hear this data, you hear these recommendations, you see these kind of urgings from certain leaders, and then folks develop plans that don't align, right? There's some folks who are going back to school here in this fall, going back full blown in the traditional model, and others with options. And we actually started offering options, the traditional, hybrid, and virtual. And over the course of a week, our numbers just spiked so rapidly and so dramatically that it was just clear we couldn't continue with that original plan. And so we dialed that back and decided to offer the virtual model only.
Was that numbers spiking among students or among the community at large, or what?
The state at large, our community, our county, and the city of Jackson in particular, and then we've been starting to see more of the pediatric COVID cases, so that as well. Plus, just some of the context of our district. We know that many of our scholars live with grandparents or an elderly aunt, or there's someone in the home that's of age, and there's lots of underlying health challenges, diabetes and asthma and high blood pressure and just on and on. So lots of that throughout the community. And so that overlaying the COVID pandemic, it was just clear that we have to be extra cautious about the safety of the young people, yes, but also the possibility of them carrying the virus back home to elderly family members and loved ones and community members.
You mentioned that the governor issued an executive order delaying the opening of school, but was it up to you in terms of was it up to each district to decide what reopening would look like, whether it was going to be hybrid, or was that also a public health decision? Yeah.
No, so there was guidance from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control. There was guidance from our state health department. There's guidance from the state agency, education agency. We never had an overall or permanent requirement that folks wear masks in the state, though there's a requirement in the city. And the governor, again, looked at some of the infection rates and some of the data that around the state and identified 8 specific counties where there was greater concern, and so we had a mandate to delay the start. But there was still all the variety. There's tons of variety even within the Jackson metro area as to the models of delivery of education, of instruction that folks are using. So there's a district adjacent to us that is 100% traditional, with some exceptions of folks who are choosing virtual. And then there are others that are offering models and maybe virtual for the first few weeks or through the end of the month or that sort of thing. We're one of, I don't know at this point, there have been more that are going virtual, at least in the short run, but more over time who are making that choice. But I know of maybe one or two other districts in the state that are virtual for the year. We selected or elected to go virtual for the first semester, again, because we can, just based on the numbers and based on the data, just made sense to call it for the semester, allow families to plan around that virtual model, allowing us to prepare ourselves for this longer run virtual. And frankly, as we continue to hear the news reports and health experts and that, I don't know that come December, January, folks will feel very differently, and we'll have a different level of spread in the state or in this county that would suggest that, okay, now we can do something different and open up some of these other options. Obviously, as you know, the virtual option, though, it's really problematic for families who, if there's a parent who's a working parent and they need to now find an alternative for their child to be during the day, custodial care and that sort of thing. So,
and that's not to mention, the technical difficulties. I think, that you and JPS were able to estimate that about 3 in 10 families in your district have issues connecting to the internet, including sometimes lacking devices. Sometimes, how are you addressing that challenge for online learning?
And that's the estimate. That 3 in 10 is the estimate for families. It's it's even greater as you think about individual scholars. So we were not one-to-one. We had about half the number of devices in our inventory for our 22,500 scholars.
One-to-one is school speak, meaning that every student has access to a device like a laptop or Chromebook for their own use.
So we had about half that in our inventory of Chromebooks and devices for them, which is a good start. And so between the inventory of devices that we have and what we're learning from families in terms of who has at least one device, even if there's 2, 3 or more scholars living in the home.
And trying to figure out how to share, right?
Exactly, which is crazy, but at least there's one there and some level of connectivity. So between that and ours, we're confident that we're able to get all of the homes connected, and then families have to do this crazy dance of who's going to get on, because school is largely happening at the same time, no matter your kindergarten or 9th grade or senior, right? And so they have to do this crazy dance of trying to share between them. But once we've blanketed the district and each of the families, we're confident that each family has at least a device and some level of connectivity. Then we start kind of going back to, okay, now where are there multiple siblings within the home, and where can we start to build up more of that? That's for now. We've ordered devices to completely go one-to-one, and those should, we're in line with everyone else around the country in getting devices in, shipments in. And so as those come in next month and on, we'll be able to deploy those devices. And so later in the fall, we will have a device for every scholar, which is really, really exciting. It's just getting there, right? It's getting to that point. And all of the cultural and logistical things around going one-to-one. Of course, you don't flip a switch and just decide, okay, well, we can go and buy the devices, and we've got the devices in, and now we're one-to-one. There's all the planning, all the preparation, all the professional development for our teachers, and the readiness for scholars, the readiness for families, just all of that stuff. One last thing I'll say on this is we have a small number of hotspots within the district. We've purchased more of those to help families that are just completely disconnected. And so we'll have some of those to deploy as well, but we're also working with the city to create the city has a longer term, multi-year term plan for expanding broadband connectivity, which is awesome, but that's years out. And so in the shorter run, in the immediate future, we've got these hotspots. And in the shorter term, kind of into the fall, we're working with the city to create a wireless meshing around the city and in some of the densely populated areas where we're concerned about the folks having less connectivity, less opportunities and access. And so creating that and creating some wireless opportunities that we can then just provide to our scholars and families, which obviously for education, for employment searches and that sort of thing, for telehealth, lots of opportunities that opens up for those families.
You mentioned health. One of the other concerns, I think about, close to 95% of your students, your scholars are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And so one of the real services that you provide is a nutritional service as a school. How are you able to make provisions along those lines, or how do you address that? Yes.
I will say, while we've got a pretty strong sense of where those needs are and who those families are and those scholars are, it still feels somewhat of a moving target, right? One, because families that are housing insecure and perhaps are underemployed or unemployed, there's oftentimes some mobility there, and so moving from school to school or home to home, and so we experience that throughout the year, and that's in and of itself a challenge. But also thinking about how you set up hubs or distribution sites for meals, for packets, instructional packets, or other resources for scholars. Those can sometimes be a little tricky, but that's exactly it. We had some experiences. Well, every summer we set up meal distribution sites around the city, and so it's not totally foreign to us.
Is that right?
Back in the spring, we did the same thing as we closed down for virtual or at-home learning. To close out the year, we created a system to get meals out, but we just ran the sites themselves, and families had to come to them. And you'd find that individuals in a community would come and get meals for several families or several of our scholars within that community on their block or in the housing projects or what have you. This going into the fall, we are still running. I think we've increased the number of those hubs, those sites, by a couple, and we're using our busing, our transportation team to help us to get the meals out further. We've been working with further into the communities, to Boys and Girls Clubs, some of the other nonprofits, to churches. We've been working with those groups to where possible, to create little pods or opportunities for families to, for the scholars to be there while parents are working, and they can get connected and work remotely, plugging into the classrooms from those sites. But they're also just sites where, folks can more readily and easily get there and pick up a meal and then go back home if they are learning from home. So lots of kind of layered strategies to try to provide for the needs.
Right. Well, there you go with strategy. But that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, you also have, these are all these additional logistical considerations that, summer provision of meals notwithstanding. I mean, you don't expect to do this during the school year. So I wanted to know how you keep thinking strategically, how you go big picture in the face of this, very difficult adaptive challenge that you are all figuring out? I mean, I know you rolled out a strategic plan last summer, for example. How do you keep thinking strategically, educationally, amidst these ripples?
It's a challenge. I will tell you, it's a challenge even outside of COVID, right? Because the day-to-day issues of life, the challenges of living in an urban area where sometimes our buildings are burglarized, and so there goes the coil from the air conditioning, and so we've got to replace that, or there go some number of our laptops or other devices or whatever it might be. Those kinds of issues, they exist already. We have the staffing to serve the scholars that we have, but that means that there are that many more people that you've got to worry about as well. And our staff members and team members, they have lives, and so they get ill or they have family issues, and so keeping the stable staffing in place is yet another issue. So those things are already at issue, and then you layer on again this pandemic that just makes it that much more difficult. So how do we maintain the focus? One is by as frequently as possible keeping the strategic plan in front of all of us, referencing, putting it directly in front of us as a leadership team, in front of our staff members, our leaders, school leaders, in front of our families, parents, and community members, all of those folks, because it has to live. And we have to continue to ensure that it lives. And so why are we making this decision? Well, if you refer back to our core values in our strategic plan, well, as we stated in our strategic plan, one of our commitments is X. Well, as we noted in the strategic plan, we're not only educating young people to, so that they can read or count or whatever, write or whatever it might be, but they do those things for a purpose. There's a larger goal in life that we're preparing them for. And so, again, using the strategic plan around that. It's also ensuring that the plan is not just Errick Greene's. I was very clear early on. We're not building this plan for Errick.
Yep.
One, I don't need it just for me. We need it as a community, right? So that when we get in the thick of things and we've got all these difficult decisions to make, and the answer is not so clear, we've got something to ground us. It's something to redirect us. And when we get that, funder or that community leader or that parent with a strong, influential voice or whatever it might be, who's got an idea of something that they want us to do, and it makes sense on the surface of it, we can put that up against our strategic plan to say, hey, these are the things that we committed to doing, first and foremost. Does that new idea, does that fit in this plan? Yes or no? And if it does, is now the right time to do that? Because we've also given some thought to not only the right thing in general, but the pieces of the thing that makes sense today, next month, next year, 3 years out, etc. Right? So it kind of insulates us from all of the great ideas that bubble up throughout the year, seemingly every day, and give us cover for doing a few things really, really well, and seeing the successes from that and having those successes fuel future work. One last thing I'll say about this, we get beaten up, have been beaten up quite a bit. Right? Long before the state came and said, hey, you've not been performing. We really want to move to take over the district. Long before that, we've gotten, because of performance, because of incidents, because of, leadership moves or whatever it might be, just ongoing and lingering perceptions of the district, leadership, of the staffing in general, of our children, of our families, of the city, all of that, right? And so what I've been really, really determined to do is create some wins for us and really publicize the heck out of those.
Celebrate.
Celebrate.
You got to have that cheerleading role.
Absolutely.
As part of the public leadership, sure, yeah.
and arresting that narrative of JPS, of Jackson, of our community, of our people, such that no one else owns storytelling rights of who we are, what we're about, what we've accomplished, and what we haven't. We have to be honest about those times when we don't quite get it right and recommit to getting it right in the future, but also being really dogmatic about the others who don't get it right when they tell our story, and pushing back hard on that so that, in the very least, it's a balanced retelling of who we are and what we're about. And that's something that I think all educators, frankly, whether you're a classroom teacher or a principal, a district superintendent, it doesn't matter, that all educators have to be more intentional about, because everybody went to school. Everybody in this country, at least. We all went to school. And so we all have some experiences with it, and therefore believe that, unlike what we do with our doctors and with our lawyers, we all believe that we can run a school, and we should, our voice and our opinion should rule the day. Oh well.
We talked a little about COVID-19, but let's shift to another pandemic, in the U.S. at least, systemic racism. Days after the murder of George Floyd, which of course succeeded the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and far too many others, you recorded a powerful video letter to the Jackson Public Schools community, which I'll link to the show page with your permission.
Sure.
For this episode. And you spoke candidly about the intersection of your personal class privilege of being able to live in a more affluent neighborhood, the intersection of that with your racial identity as a black man, using Claude Steele's term, whistling Vivaldi, to describe what you found yourself doing as you went out for a run, actively trying to seem less threatening to those you passed along the way. Now, you emphasize that you did not share this anecdote as a play for sympathy, but rather to acknowledge that despite the academic and professional achievements that enabled you to earn, in your words, a bit of that American dream, your skin color is often a liability. You quickly connected this personal example to the broader district aims of relevant education and the moral imperative to support young scholars to become righteous leaders in their community and in the larger world. Along with, I know, many others, I was addressed and deeply moved by this kind of public testimony that we don't normally hear from our school leaders, certainly. I can't think it was an easy decision to record this video letter. May I ask how you decided to do it and how it fits for you into what you consider the public leadership dimension of your role?
A few things. One, we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and so we're at a distance. And so all of the happenings of life, illnesses, deaths, birthdays, anniversaries, just all of the happenings of life are being experienced at a distance. This too, this resurgence of attention around racial discrimination, injustice, all of that was being experienced largely at a distance and through television and computer screens and on social media platforms and all of that. And so, like others, I was grappling with my own kind of sense making of it, and what does this mean, and what is my responsibility as an individual, as a member of my own community and network, but also as a leader in the district. It just felt like remaining silent was not an option. And then, I rarely kind of position myself as the activist, quote unquote, as the stereotypical, I should say, activist and use my voice and my platform in those ways. But I felt it would have been reckless and a huge missed opportunity for me to remain silent and not share just my concerns about what had happened with those individuals and many others in the past, the ongoing challenges around racial injustice. Find myself as someone who grew up in the North. I'm living in the South, and specifically in Jackson and in the state of Mississippi with all of its history around race and social justice and all of that. It's just, again, I couldn't remain silent. I wasn't sure exactly what I needed to say, though. Yeah, I think like many people, just grappling with what is it that I want to say, and what is it that I want to promise and commit to, pretty quickly, what surfaced for me was, I lead the Jackson Public School District. I work with some amazing educators, amazing board members, peers in the community, and families and folks who, we're all grappling with what now? How do we keep from coming back around to these same, horrible acknowledgments of killings and injustice in all their forms? And so wanted to just spark for us as educators. Let's ensure that in the very least, what we do in classrooms and in learning spaces, that we're creating opportunities and taking responsibility and the opportunities for developing in our young people the skills, the capacity, the desire to make the world a world in which we all want to live. And seeing that as not just a nice to have, a nice to do, but a moral imperative. This is the work. The work is not simply teaching young Errick to read, teaching young, Kamisha to write, or to think critically about some benign topic, but thinking critically about the world around us and the broader context, and the ways in which we can all act to make it better. And I want to be real. I typically feel safe when I'm out running, relatively safe when I'm out running in my neighborhood. But the reality is, even with that, and even with, the trappings of the life that I've amassed over time, it occurs to me that the white woman running near me could feel some level of fear or danger from me simply by my skin color. And so I'm really conscious of that, and obviously in the moment I want to try to dispel any of those types of fears, but I'm also conscious of the fact that that's on my mind, that's taking up part of my headspace in the moment, and it's unfortunate.
Well, real was how it came across, and I think that was part of the power. It was not at all dogmatic. It was not at all prescriptive. But I think that was the thing. It felt like it was really clearly that you were speaking from the heart. You said in the letter, in the video letter, that you don't consider yourself a quote-unquote activist, but that nobody in this current moment has the luxury of sitting on the sidelines when it comes to fighting oppression and systemic racism. Now, you just said that you were beginning to think, with some of your colleagues at JPS, and I just wanted to ask, because some of the work I'm most passionate about when I consult with schools is helping educators, students, and parents have more productive conversations about hard topics. including social identities, for example, and systemic racism. So I'm curious about if there are, if the plan's taking shape, or where you are in terms of thinking about this perhaps in a more explicit way, given the climate of the country, given the charged character of this election. Are there plans to listen to students and educators' concerns about the current politics? I mean, how are you thinking about moving forward to a more just society, and schools' role in that? Because, for me, one of the things that we, tend to, because there are all of these other things, those issues about teaching somebody to read, teaching somebody to write and compute, those are, important things. But one of the things that we can tend to abdicate, especially for public schools getting slammed with these standards of accountability at the expense of thinking about how we are modeling and how we are asking students to participate as citizens, giving opportunities to do that, because it's not easy to do. So I just wanted to check in with where you all are with that.
If there are a few things that are bubbling up. One is some pretty specific work around just kind of rethinking the curriculum, what it includes, what it doesn't include, how it lives in classrooms. And obviously we're not in a place, and certainly not right now, to totally revamp the curriculum, but some pretty targeted efforts around, like, what are some of the required readings and lessons around history and that sort of thing that we can fairly easily push on and layer into the current curriculum, just to beef that up and ensure that all of our scholars see themselves more readily in what they're learning, and the relevance in what they're learning and how they're learning.
And relevance is one of those core values that's in that drives your mission, which I think is super.
It's one of the 6, and we mean it. We mean it. We're constantly referencing. It was early on. We do shout outs, and we kind of we do shout outs for things that people have done in the past week or so in team meetings and that. And we reference, even in agenda items with our board, the core values or the pieces of the strategic plan that this new item, this new contract, or this new initiative that they align to. Early on, excellence, growth mindset, maybe even relationships were the easy go-tos. Now, more and more, folks are referencing our work around and the connection to and the furtherance of relevance as we do those shout outs and as we acknowledge kind of the connectedness of these new initiatives. So
if I could interrupt to give you a shout out in real time, I think this is one of the things that is so important, such a great model of, plenty of schools have these mission statements, or let alone strategic plans, which many people in the district don't even know about, right? They're far removed from the life of the school, and it's very easy for that sort of thing to happen, and nobody's going to want you to recite the strategic plan and look at the flag every day, as we do at the Pledge of Allegiance. Like, it can't happen that way, that you remember it because you repeat it all the time, but is a way to make it real and to make it live, to make it a living, the applicability of what you've decided that you want to do, to keep bringing that out. I think it's so important, because otherwise it is just something on the front page of the student handbook, or the district handbook, or what have you. It's not,
and it doesn't live. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, we thought quite a bit as we were developing the plan about how we would keep it alive and who would keep it alive. It can't just be Errick. So the point I was making with that is, relevance has been a thing that is bubbling up more and more, where folks are seeing opportunities to create relevance and to acknowledge the relevance or where things are irrelevant. And therefore, we need to look again at, so is this the thing that we should be doing? So that work that I named as well, one of the pieces of the strategic plan is our the profile of a JPS graduate, and in that we specifically call out this need to and this desire to develop young people who have some sense of government and democracy, and have some sense of a strong sense of and kind of ownership of the political issues, and that's big P, small p, political issues within the community, state, country, around the world, and that they act on it. And so that they are registered voters, and that they have, developed a stand, and likely that stance will change and evolve over time as they grow. But that's specifically called out in our profile of a JPS graduate. And so we've developed a partnership with actually a couple of organizations that are helping us to, one, just ensure that our young people are registered, but also providing them with platforms and some deeper understanding of the governmental systems and some of the various workings of the democratic society. And so there are ways that we're living into this, and we see that there's so much more that we could and want to do.
And I imagine being in the state capital, there would be some more opportunities than you would if you were 100 miles away or something like that.
Also, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Also, just highlighting again some of the young people who are already using their voice. Right outside of us, there a young lady who just graduated led one of the protests around police brutality and unarmed killings of unarmed black men or black folks. And so it's great to see that one, that there exists young people who already want to engage and have a mind to engage, and that we're finding ways, authentic ways to engage them over time that they're responding to.
Covered some hard ground here. How about hope? In this moment, in this hard job, where are the seeds for you? Where do you find hope right now?
I'm a hopeful guy.
Yeah.
Right. I was raised just to believe that pretty much anything is possible. You have to create a plan. You got to commit to it. You've got to find the resources or acknowledge and access the resources that you already have. So that's kind of my orientation just to life and to work. I came here because I was hopeful, not because of all of the things that were broken and dysfunctional and not in place, but for all the things that were sources of strength and the resources and the assets and all those things that exist here in Jackson and in JPS in particular. As I look out at our babies, the more and more I see them, the more I'm just like, there's absolutely no reason why you can't go out and kick butt in the world. There's no reason, right? And quite often the reason why you don't is because people like me in this role or others in district roles or school leaders or teachers or what have you, because we haven't prepared you. And so I'm determined that that's not going to be your story. You're going to be well prepared, and you'll have the option to go out and do great things or sit on it. But it won't because you weren't prepared. So for sure, as I see our babies and just think about all that, could be in their lives if somebody just give a daggone. Also hope in the team that we're amassing here.
Okay.
For all the haters, and we have some on the team, but not a lot. But for all the haters that exist, the people in and around the area who just don't believe it can be done, there are tons more folks who believe it in their bones, that it can and must be done, that they are enough. whether you know how to use Zoom or Google Classroom or any of those right now or not, that you are enough. You're smart enough, you're caring enough, determined enough to figure it out, access the resources, get smart about how to do the work better, more effectively, and that it's your job to do that and you're going to do it. So there's lots of hope around us. We as I said, we have the haters. We have the folks who make it their business to tear down the district, to tear down the leaders, the teachers, the children and families pretty regularly. But for whatever number of them,
and they've had a little more time on their hands in the past few months.
Apparently, I can't imagine that being my life's work, tearing down other people. Clearly, like, are you retired? Like, how are you able to do this? But for whatever number of folks that there are of those, there's so many more who have locked their arms and are standing around us, kind of protecting us, protecting the vision. And the possibility that is Jackson Public Schools. And so, yeah.
I wanted to ask too about this notion of team and the way you use team, because this morning I watched your recent message. I think maybe it was just yesterday that it came out. I'm not sure. It was very recent. To administrators, faculty, and staff is the way they took it, right, of Jackson Public Schools, whom you addressed as Team JPS.
Yeah.
Now, I know, you've alluded to it, and I know from talking with you over the years that your vision of leadership is not the traditional guy at the top of the org chart, just calling the shots. I know that for you, it's about teamwork, real teamwork and collaboration, more of what scholar Jill Harrison-Berg likes to call co-performing leadership. So that notion of team in JPS, first of all, do I have it right that you're thinking about like all the people, as part of the team? Okay. And you've also talked about the importance, you and I have talked about the importance for you as a leader in allowing people the space, to screw up, and learn from that. Could you riff on that for just a second? Because I think sometimes people, confuse leadership with management, and then of course, especially with micromanagement, like where like you do this thing that I told you.
May I breathe today, sir? May I breathe? Is it okay if I breathe today? Like, let me know when I can. Kind of a thing. So lots of I spend a lot of time thinking about leadership, about team, and all of that. So my job is to ensure that we create conditions for great, magical, excellent things to happen and to be done. And so I spend a lot of time ensuring that I'm building up the folks around me. And that's not the arbitrary and kind of baseless accolades and
you're not blowing sunshine.
Absolutely. Right? No, we have to give one another the hard truth. We're building a muscle, I like to say. We're building a muscle around feedback, giving and receiving. Because as I've learned it, it's just as hard sometimes to give the tough feedback as it is to receive it. But we're doing that. I'm modeling it. I'm modeling those times when it doesn't feel great. I'm modeling those times when I'm so determined that what I'm thinking is the right way, but my team is not on the same page with me. I've got to investigate that. I've got to explore that. Like, how is it that I'm just completely right and everybody else is wrong? How is that possible? Right? I mean, it's possible, but is it likely that everybody else is wrong? So let's explore this. This is why I think as I do. This is why I believe what I do. Help me understand what I'm missing. And so quite frequently, and if not in every meeting, what I'll say to team members is, one, I'll ask a question or pose a direction or a pathway, and then ask for feedback and not move on until I've gotten it, and then do some cold calling. Or I'll say, poke holes in this. What am I missing? No, you cannot just allow me to jump out there with this. I know that I'm missing something. Help me see what I'm missing.
And did it take a while before people believed you?
Yeah.
Because this is not the way, this is not what a lot of leaders ask for.
And more to the point, it took a while before they would even say, like, listen, Dr. Greene, this isn't how we have operated. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but I told you, like, I need the feedback. I hear you. And what we've experienced for many of us, our entire careers, is that when you disagree or oppose the person, who's supposed to be leading, then that puts you in danger.
Yeah, you're supposed to be talking smack in the teacher's lounge. In the cafeteria or something like that. It's not supposed to be
exactly
actually disagreeing respectfully and constructively in a moment where it can make some difference.
And what it is that's exactly it. So we will have the meetings after the meeting in the parking lot or in the lounge or off in our individual offices, but we won't say it at the table. And so I've started calling people out for having meetings after the meeting. That's what you're going to get called out for. You're going to get called out because you didn't push back on me when I said da-da-da. That's what people are getting called out for. So it's if this is the thing that drives you, then let's give you some of that experience, but for doing the things outside of this constructive, let's build and riff and iron sharpening iron here together at the table. Right? Don't text me after the fact. Or I would have said, or I was thinking, nope, that's not okay. Next time, say it at the table. And when I've gotten the text during the meeting, yes.
From somebody at the table? Oh, man.
Yeah, that's not true, Dr. Greene. It's actually my response is say it. Say it.
Do you text them back?
Yes. Yes.
Text them back? Say it. Okay.
I absolutely do.
Funny.
I absolutely do. Say it now. Because again, those are the behaviors that it just perpetuates that sense that we can't have honest conversation here. We're okay. Our relationships will survive this. Your employment will survive this. Let me show you. I know that you had some strong feelings about X. Say it now. It's it's a culture we're building, and we had to do the things though, like the relationship building, getting to know one another. We're continuing to do that. We had to create the norms, attack the issue, not the person, assume the best intentions, confidentiality, all those things that create the conditions for me to have an honest conversation with you right here.
And you make those explicit.
Oh, we created those norms. Yeah. We as a team created those norms from the beginning.
Right.
And every year we re-up. Okay, these were the norms that we had last year. Do these still make sense? Mm-hmm. And people will say, hey, I'm gonna be vulnerable now, and da 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 da. I was like, okay. And then when you do it, like, people are celebrating you and whatnot. So you were being vulnerable. Okay, well, let's have more and more of this vulnerability.
That's critical for any kind of team that hopes to be productive. And I advise teachers to do it with students. To create those things together. And so it creates a much different environment. In classes, just to draw an analogy for a second. Much different environment to develop those things together, rather than have the students roll in and you hand them a sheet of paper, point to something on the wall and say, this is the way that it's going in here.
Right. One last thought on that is I also have become pretty disciplined about coming back around to apologize for something or naming something that I got wrong.
Okay.
Again, because I want to debunk this belief that the positional leader has all the knowledge and is always going to get it right. So I've got to debunk that. And I very intentionally, when we're talking about, high school schedules, I very intentionally position the leader in that discussion as the person who does that work. The assistant superintendent for high schools, you've got to lead this conversation because I'm out of my depth. Please lead us through this. And not because you've got all the knowledge, but because you have more of the knowledge, intimate knowledge and experience than most of us at this table. And so, pulling myself back from that, not only positional leadership, but leadership in this discussion to position others to lead us out, I think is another thing that's allowing people to see themselves as, no, we're equals in this discussion. We're equals in this discussion, and your ideas and your beliefs and your experiences have got to show up at the table, or we're not getting the full benefit of who you are as a professional, as an educator. You're holding back on us, and therefore our decision making and the pathways that we take are likely not going to be the best because we don't have the full benefit of all that you could bring.
Leadership is never easy, let alone in an urban school district where I think the average tenure of a superintendent is something like around 4 years. And as we've said, let alone during a pandemic in which the federal government has completely abdicated a leadership role. How are you taking care of yourself?
Wow. I appreciate that question. I will say I'm doing a decent job given the crazy, stressful period that we're in. But I'm doing a decent job because I came into this role being really, really intentional about it. I before I even started the role, I was very mindful about the home and what I needed at home to relax when I come home. Finding that restaurant or that place where I could go and walk, or those kinds of things, a massage therapist, and even while I haven't settled on one yet, finding a therapist, a psychologist, or someone. All those kinds of things. I was very intentional about those things coming in because I wanted to make sure that I was giving myself a fighting chance to sustain and to be sane and to manage stress. High blood pressure runs in the family, diabetes runs in the family, all those kinds of things, and I was just determined that I would be as intentional as possible about that. So here comes COVID. I already have some practices around just healthy eating, healthier eating, healthier living, exercising, creating the breaks in my day and in life just to kind of rejuvenate in that. So I'm doing a bit of that. I do a lot of self-talk as well. Also, frankly, I've just got a lot of people who are betting on me and holding me accountable for taking care of myself. And so getting the rest, unplugging at some point, not taking on too much at once, all those things. So I listen a lot to my peers who have been or are currently serving in the role, and there's a number of us who are intentional about surviving the superintendency. And I actually, I named from the very beginning of my tenure here, I plan to be here for quite some time. I plan to be here at least for a decade. Because I just want to ensure that the things that we build take root, that I've built out a team here where if something happens to me or if I get voted off the island, as I sometimes say, that they'll be able to easily find someone from within who can pick it up and carry it forward. Because they've got the skills, they've got the knowledge, there's a level of commitment, and they've been in the work. So wouldn't miss a beat.
Often, because this is a show about what and how and why we learn, I like to ask guests, about a teacher who was a strong influence on you. And you, even though I've mentioned already, your bio on the JPS website is pretty short. It's 5 succinct paragraphs. But Mrs. Granberry gets a shout out. Your third grade teacher, whom you credit with inspiring, your love of learning. And you say a little bit about her there. I wondered if you wanted to say anything else quickly about her, but I also wanted to ask about some of these influences in terms of leadership. So however way you want to take that, but I'm interested in the influences and the inspiration for you in doing this.
I am blessed in a lot of ways, not the least of which is my network. It's hard for me to hold in my head the numbers of people that I've learned from. And that's folks that I've worked with very closely, and that's folks with whom I've had kind of a shorter experience. And so Mrs. Granberry was an amazing teacher. And honestly, I don't know how she did on evaluations or, classroom observations. And I don't know how she would have done on that. What I will tell you is she had relationships. That was her superpower. Relationships. I believed that I could do anything. She partnered very closely with my family, and so that is absolutely clear. That was a clear lesson as I moved into the profession as a teacher and school leader and on. That relationships that was going to be part of the magic that helps me to achieve anything in the work. So for sure, that relationship. My parents, my dad is deceased now, but my parents were. My mom is they're just really good people, and again with relationships, they both of them just exude this level of comfort, so that people very easily warm up to them, come to them with challenges, and come to them and want to celebrate successes, that sort of thing. And so that's the cloth that I'm cut from. I want and need people to be comfortable around me. That makes me comfortable. That's, of course, I'm talking about people who are good people or doing good things in the world. I don't want folks who are tearing others down to be comfortable around me. In fact, I want you to be uncomfortable. So again, by all the colleagues, people who've worked along with me, people I've supervised, people who have supervised me, families that I've worked alongside, parents, on and on and on. I find myself over time just taking pieces of individuals, people like yourself, people who are super, super smart, very critical of ideas and the world around them, that have challenged me to think more critically about what exists and why what we really want out of life doesn't exist. And therefore, what can we do about it? What's my role in this? And seeing myself as someone who has some agency to make things happen, and challenging myself to do that.
Errick, thank you so much. Thanks for that lovely, kind word. Thank you for your time today. Is there a question you would have liked me to ask that I did not ask? Is there something else that you would like to add?
One thing that I just don't want to ever miss the opportunity to do is to shout out this amazing community. I now get it. I heard in DC the superintendent, the chancellor there, shout out and give accolades to the community there. And I agreed, but I wasn't in that role. And same in other places where I've been. Definitely in Tulsa, superintendent there, she doesn't miss an opportunity to shout out the Tulsans and the fiber of the community there. I get it now. From this role, with this perspective, understanding more deeply the challenges that people face, but also the options that people have to lean in or to lean back, and the numbers of times that people actually lean in with resources to support, fellow man, another family, another organization, offering resources, giving grace to us when we don't quite get it right or when we misstep or what have you. Just all of those things. It's pretty remarkable. In fact, it makes me emotional when I think about just all that that people do to create the kind of community that we all really deserve and want, and many of us want and want to live in, and that we want for our children. And so I'm just deeply indebted, greatly appreciative and humbled by the heart that goes into the experiences that I've had here in Jackson. It was never my plan to be here in Jackson, but I'm so thankful that I'm here now.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of people in the community who would say that they're very thankful that you were there.
Thank you.
I'm thankful you've been here. Such a pleasure to talk to you under any circumstances, but this has been particularly rich.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it. Always just good to chat with you. I feel blessed every time I emerge with, like, okay, we got this. We can do this.
Now, like over under for the closing credits, like you, me, and Al do some karaoke. Is that what you?
Yeah.
That's what we should do.
That's exactly
get
it.
Together.
That's exactly it.
That's it for today's show. My great thanks to Dr. Greene for taking the time to talk, and to Gil Scott Chapman for laying down some special Mississippi-inspired piano tracks for use in this episode. Thanks, as always, to Schaefer James for intro and outro music, and thanks to you for listening, sharing, and subscribing to the show. Rating and reviewing on your podcast platform of choice helps us connect with other people curious about what and how and why we learn. A proud member of the Lyceum Consortium for Education Podcasts, Point of Learning is written, recorded, edited, mixed, and produced by me here in sunny Buffalo, New York. I'm Peter Horn, and I'll be back at you with a fresh episode just as soon as I can. Until then, stay safe, strong, and prophetic. Make sure everyone you know has participated in the census, and as someone who just volunteered to become a poll worker in my county, see what steps you can take to help November voting go smoothly where you live. We'll just sing it right up, because I do have some like raw demo tapes from the new deck.
Yeah.
Circuit 2013. So I'm just going to throw that in there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And when you're ready, I'll make sure that my attorneys shout you out.
Because that was not in the release form.
Exactly. There was no release form. Yep.
Cool.